What's up, spell singers? My name is Garion John Wells.
I'm Drew Flitton.
And I'm Cory Janibagian.
And this is Untap
Upkeep.
Drink.
Beer up.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Untap Upkeep Drink. Today is the first episode of Brewers Week.
Yeah.
So this week, over the next 5 days, we're going to have 5 episodes, and each episode we're going to cover a slightly different topic, if not just an entirely different one. At the end of the week, we're going to have an episode where we're talking about homebrewing, and in that effect, we actually have a homebrew that we've made, and we're going to be trying it out for the first time on Friday.
Ooh, this week's all about the beers, baby.
Yeah, we jam-packed it. Usually we go light on the beer and heavy on the magic. This time we're going heavy on the beer and still heavy on the magic.
Where we can, for sure. But the last episode is going to be all about beer.
So to start off the week, we're going to be explaining sort of different types of beers, how they're made, regional kind of intricacies of where these beers come from, as well as we're gonna introduce a new couple statistics that we might start talking about on this podcast. And tagged along with that, our deck tech for today is going to be a mill strategy deck in Commander. It's going to be Fblthp the Lost.
Yeah, this is the deck that I made because I opened my mouth, basically.
Pretty much.
Yep.
Promptly shoved foot inside. So to start out, we're doing light beers. So we're gonna start light and go heavy throughout the week. Before we get into this discussion on light beer and start talking about some of these metrics we've discovered will help us better represent all the beers we review, let's get to the beers we've got for the show. I'm drinking the St. Pauli Girl from St. Pauli Brewery. It's just a lager. St. Pauli Girl lager, 4.9% ABV and 18 IBUs. The color is unlisted, but it's a very, very golden wheat color, super light, completely translucent.
Yeah, so the St. Pauli Girl's probably one of the first beers, one of the nicer beers that I've had.
Yeah, it's one that Cory and I got into a long time ago.
It holds a special place.
Yeah, this episode has a lot of classics.
It's got what we could only describe as a little bit of a skunky nose smell. It goes down kind of bitter, a little bit hoppy, but mostly wheat. It's not quite as cold as I'd like it, but it seems carbonated even though it doesn't have a ton of head on it.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've actually had this, so it tastes a bit different than I remember. It definitely has the more European flavor of the lagers, not the American lagers.
Yeah, it's really, really sweet, and I like it.
But it is funky.
It's definitely skunky. When we cracked it, the whole room smelled like it.
You can tell immediately. So
I'm rocking the Lev Golden Lion Pilsner style lager. So this bottle's super dope. It's got a big old lion on it, but it's a 4.8% Czech beer. The IBUs were unlisted, so it's probably pretty low. It's got a nice amber color, a little bit of head, still bubbling. It's got some good aromas, some nice malts coming through. That is a lot bitter than I thought it was going to be, especially coming off the St. Pauli's Girl.
Yeah, this one's a lot darker, a little more orange.
You get a lot of just your standard lager flavor right at the beginning, and then it just fades into some real bitter notes.
Whoa, this one's weird.
Yeah.
I like it. It's almost got like an orange peel kind of bitter, but the wheat, like malty wheat flavors are kind of subdued. It's super refreshing. It's really crisp. The bitterness tastes less hoppy and more like a rindy kind of bitter to me.
Yeah, it's a different kind.
Yeah, the smell is almost a little bit like spiced.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a little bit of bitterness that kind of lingers afterwards.
Yeah, just a touch.
Yeah, see, these ones were almost near the bottom shelf, and I was like, I don't know. But I saw these labels, and I was just like, dude, these Lev beers, I got to grab a couple for the cast. They're too cool. Yeah, and it doesn't disappoint.
Yeah, I mean, it's solid. Again, it is a European lager. It has a sweetness to it compared to what an American lager would taste like.
Yeah, I don't know if I had a lot of Czech beers, but I like this one. Okay, Drew, what do you got?
Cory's very excited about this one.
We've only said this name, 4 times on the podcast so far?
It is from Margaritaville.
Yeah.
It is the Land Shark.
Land Shark.
My favorite beer of all time.
It is
I've never had it.
Island-style lager. It is crisp. It is refreshing. It is the perfect summer beer,
What's the ABV on this one?
4.6, and I could not find the IBUs.
I can't imagine any of these are super high.
No,
They're light beers.
they're infinitely sessionable.
Honestly, there's not really much to the Land Shark. It reminds me more of a cerveza than like an American lager.
So good. Yeah, I agree. It's more on the sweeter side. It's much better ice
The
cold.
legendary Land Shark.
I still remember the first time having one of these. We were hanging out at my friend Megan's house in Wyoming. She brought a 6-pack, and I just started cracking them, and I couldn't get enough. And I was like, "Oh, this beer is great."
This beer is super smooth, super sweet, and it's like these other two beers that we have, except it has none of that funk. It's just clean, crisp. I think that's where a lot of people who like Miller and Coors and stuff like that, when they go to the German beers and stuff, they're like, oh, it's skunky, it's weird. This has that clean kind of more American refined.
Yeah, and I guess
taste to
that might be a downer for some people that it is kind of generic, but
It's delicious.
I don't know. I love it. I could drink that literally all day.
All right, now that we've talked about those beers, let's talk about just beers in general.
So I think Garion talked about it earlier, but we're going to start using some weird terms in this episode. And we got all of them from craftbeer.com. If you guys have any questions about beer at all, go check this website out because it is amazing.
Extensive.
Yeah, it's a wealth of knowledge that people have pooled together. They're working together. It's like a collaborative effort. Just people who love craft beer. They're super passionate about it, and they want other people to have as much information. They've got like a craft beer study guide, so you can learn all that you can, and that's where we got a lot of this information.
Yeah, Drew and I fell down the rabbit hole for hours just looking at all these beers.
Yeah. So the 3 stats that we're actually going to be looking at are the IBUs, which we talk about every episode, the BU to GU, which I'll explain in a second, and then the SRM values. So the IBUs is International Bitterness Units. It is the alpha acid flavor that you get from hops after it's been brewed in a beer. Like the longer it's boiling, the more bitter notes are going to come through. So that's the reason why there's like time sensitive windows for when you put in hops, is because it changes how much of these alpha acids are in the beer, and that's the way that we actually measure the bitterness, is using those alpha acids.
Yeah, so one way to just remember is that the higher this number is, the more bitter a beer is. That's just the most straightforward way to look at it.
And the idea that it is more bitter is kind of a frustrating thing to me, just because the next stat, the BU to GU, which is your bitterness units to your gravity units, and gravity units are the amount of sugars that you have in there. And so when you take this ratio, it gives you like what the actual profile of the beer is.
Yeah.
And if it's below 0.5, it's going to be more sweet. And if it's above 0.5, it's going to be more hoppy or more bitter.
Yeah, so the scale goes from, I think it goes from 0 to 1, and a 1 is incredibly bitter.
It is,
and a 0 has zero bitterness at all. It is just sweet.
Yeah, but this is like the reason why I think this is such an important stat is because it explains the reason why a stout can have such high IBUs, but still not just be like completely bitter. Like it does have a lot of hop characteristics to it, but it doesn't taste as bitter as what an IPA will, because it also has those sugars to balance it out.
Yeah. And the last number we're going to talk about is actually the first one that we're going to introduce here. It's the SRM, which is the standard reference method, which is basically the way that we can characterize the colors of our beer, which is why we're going to use it first here, because we're starting on light beers. And so the SRM runs from 1 all the way up to 50. And really quickly, I'll run through what they've categorized these numbers as. So 1 to 1.5 is very light, 2 to 3 is straw, 4 is pale, 5 to 6 is gold, 7 is light amber, 8 is amber, 9 is medium amber, 10 through 12 is copper garnet, 13 to 15 is light brown, 16 through 17 is either brown reddish or brown chestnut brown, 18 to 24 is dark brown, 25 to 39 is very dark, and anything above 40 is black. So this is just a helpful way for you to kind of run through the numbers on how light the coloring of your beer is going to be.
Yeah, and Gary and I have a joke kind of when it comes to dark beers, which is how can you tell like what is darker than other? And it's basically just like, well, if I hold it up to the light, can I see through it? Just like, that's probably about a 41.
Yeah.
So craft beer has all this information and more. Like they've got food pairings for beers or types of beer specifically, the glassware you should use, serving temperature, country of origin, and just loads more quantitative stats like IBUs, They've got your ABV, like the range that the beers are normally under, all of that sort of thing. There's so much information on there that we literally could just spend like the rest of the week talking about them.
Yeah, we just took a handful of the more common beers that all of us are more familiar with, but there's some crazy beers on their website, and there's just pages of information on there if you want to check it out.
All right, Corey, why don't you start us off?
So starting us off, we got your classic wheat beers. And for the American wheat, we have ranges listed from IBUs is usually like 10 to 35. The BU to GU is 0.28 to 0.62. So they're mostly on the sweeter side, but they can dive into the higher bitter end. And then the SRM is 2 to 10.
So that's from straw to like medium amber.
Yeah, so how we divided these beers is we chose like 9 or 10 as the cutoff point, where everything below that is a quote-unquote light beer, and then everything above that is a quote-unquote dark beer.
Yeah, we used ambers as our cutting point.
Yeah.
And that, again, is our characterization, us here at the podcast.
And it's mainly just because there's so many beers that are in the light-colored realm that it encompasses more than what the actual dark side of the beers do. So that just seemed like a good balance point to not have so much in one episode versus none in another.
Yeah, and like I said, it goes from 2 to 10, so that's just wheat beers. They can range from all sorts of colors, so it's kind of hard to just narrow one thing down. So I think craftbeer.com has really good descriptions of all of these beers, and so instead of us just trying to come up with our own definitions, we're going to read a lot of what they have on their website. So if this sounds just textbooky, just bear with us. These are the experts. They know what's up.
Yeah, we'll try and summarize where we can, but some of them just have very good definitions.
Yeah. So for wheat beers, they're typically lighter in appearance, and they're made with either ale or lager yeast. And then the specifically American wheat beer is usually, or they can be brewed at least 30% malted wheat. And just like German Hefeweizens, they can be served unfiltered and have a really cloudy appearance. So if you ever see that, just know that it's just an unfiltered beer. It's not like a bad beer or anything.
Right. So the clarity doesn't actually affect the color. The color can still be light, but not completely clear.
Yeah. And then these are usually hoppier than the German ones.
The American wheats.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
sorry. So these are usually hoppier than the German ones. And if you remember a couple episodes, we've talked about beers that have sort of weird fruity notes to them, even though they aren't fruit beers. And these are just the esters in the beers. And a lot of the American wheat beers don't have these flavors.
Yeah, that's a product of the yeast, which we'll talk about, I think, on the last episode of this week. So look forward to that. But the yeast produces fruity esters as like basically when it's off-gassing, and that's where you get that. And you notice just in the beers that we have today, the Landshark that I have tastes different, and it is kind of a sweetness difference that you have. And the European-style beers actually have more of like a fruity smell to it than what the Landshark does.
Yeah, so if you ever had a beer and it tastes kind of like banana-y, that's just what we're talking about. It's really weird.
Yeah, don't think your mouth is tricking you. There's some chemicals in there that really taste that way.
Yeah, and so with each of these beers, we've just listed an example that it's just either a beer that we like or that we've had on the show. And right now, we've got the Lagunitas Little Something Something.
Not a bad beer at all.
I really like Lagunitas.
All right, the next one we have is the lager, specifically the American lager, IBUs 5 to 15, which probably is about where Landshark is. I was thinking it was somewhere around like 6 to 10.
Yeah.
BUGU is 0.13 to 0.31, so a lot of
Always
sugars compared
sweet.
to the bitterness to it. And then SRM 2 to 6, so from straw to gold. And as an example, I mean, just generic lagers like American lagers.
Yeah,
We've got Landshark here. Just any of the lagers that we have right now on the show, they're all lagers, as it turns out. So American lagers have basically no hop or malt character. They're very, very simple. They're crisp, clean, and I think the most important part is that American lagers are more carbonated than what European lagers are.
To which I can attest.
Which kind of gives that crisp finish, but they just have the very simple characteristics of beers. There's not like any complex aromas or anything going on.
Yeah, I think lagers, or at least these American type of lagers, are probably one of the most common types of beers that you can ever find in a bar. It's just, like Drew was saying, Landshark, you got like Bud Light and Coors, like all of those are just lagers, just American lagers.
And honestly, all three of these beers are a good example of, kind of generic lagers, two of which are from out of country and one from in. So if you want to do a little experimenting.
It's easy to see the differences.
Yeah. The next type we've got on this list is blonde ales. We're looking at IBUs of 15 to 25, so a little more bitter. But the BUGU stays at 0.33 to 0.45. So for the most part, they're still on the sweeter side. And we're looking at an SRM of 3 to 7, so still quite light. These are one of the most approachable styles. They're golden or blonde, and they're just easy drinking, visually appealing, very clear, crisp beers. They don't have super dominating malt or hop characters. Craftbeer.com describes them as rounded and smooth and just kind of an American classic. So sometimes these are referred to as a golden ale instead of a blonde, but these both kind of fall into the same categories. And they can have a lot of really cool like spices or honey and fruit added that help ferment with the lager or ale yeast to give them their kind of classic sweeter flavors. These are some delicious beers. The example we have listed is the Brewers Cabinets Tahoe beer, which is a blonde ale.
Yeah, it's the Tahoe beer that Cory brought back.
Yeah, it was really, really good. So the next one we got is the Pilsner. So we got the Bohemian style Pilsner, which is an IBU of 30 to 45, a BU to GU of 0.68 to 0.80, so it's less sweet, more bitter, and then an SRM of 3 to 7.
As a quick note, I think this is why when my wife and a couple of my friends introduced me to beers and I started drinking for the first time, they thought, okay, he doesn't like, IPAs, so maybe we'll give him a Pilsner. And I didn't like that either because it still is higher end on that more bitter scale than sweet. I'm a sweet type of guy.
Same. So the Bohemian Pilsner it has a slightly sweet flavor and it mixes well with the malts that they use. So the hop bitterness it's on the lower side, even though, like we said, the BU to GU is in the bitterness side. It's just, it relies more on the malt for the bitterness. And so this style originated in 1842 with Pilsner originally indicating an appellation in the Czech Republic. We're focusing on the Bohemian style right now, and they have more of a hoppy bitterness as opposed to the American or the German style Pilsners. And they're also usually on the darker side than the other Pilsners. Like the beer I'm drinking right now, it's a Pilsner style lager, and it's the darkest one here. It's like an amber color. And then the example that we have is the Bohemian Brewery Pilsner from Bohemian Brewery just here in Utah. It's really, really good.
All right, the next one on the list is the Hef or the Hefeweizen. Specifically, we're looking at the German style Hefeweizen here. IBU's 10 to 15. The BU to GU is 0.21 to 0.27, so a lot more on the sweet side.
I like that.
This is one of Garion's favorite styles of beer. Basically, if I get a Hef for the show, Garion's probably going to be drinking it. The SRM's between 3 to 9, so again, you start to get that golds and then into the ambers. So with Hefs, they're one of the few beer styles that actually need to be made with wheat specifically. That's not like just categorized as a generic wheat beer. So they need to be at least 50% malted wheat. With Hefeweizens, we get a lot of the yeasty aromas. You get the kind of like fruity or banana. We get clove, and that's, I think, more indicative of the German styles than it is Americans. But they just have like a massive flavor variety because people can put basically anything in them.
Yeah, they're, like we've said, they're one of the more common types of beer, especially European beers. Yeah. And they're so good.
What's also great about them is that they are very sessionable again. They have a pretty low alcohol content, and they're just probably the most popular beer in the world, I would guess, at this point. But they're definitely, like, in European styles, as Cory said, like, one of the most popular.
Yeah.
The example I have here is the Hofbrau Hef, which is one of the first beers we actually had on the show. I think it was episode 1. It was the one that I got for Garion.
It was delicious.
Hofbrau.
All right, so moving on, we've got the triples, which is a Belgian-style triple. That's what we're going to focus on. The IBUs range from 20 to 45, so these are starting to get towards that bitter range. The BUGU still staying at 0.29 to 0.49, so they're going to keep it balanced. And then the SRM 4 to 9, so these can sometimes break that sort of amber color. The triples themselves are often complex with notable sweetness, and that comes from the malts that they use, as well as sometimes they'll put in some, spicy flavors, more like, cloves and cardamom and things like that, not, spicy peppers or black pepper or anything like that. The complexity they get is due to the yeast And so these are, because we're talking about Belgian style specifically, these are generally a little less controlled brewing styles than like the American style. And so they allow some of those yeasts to sort of permutate wildly in a way. And so they have a little more of these esters. They come up with a little more interesting flavors than you'd get in a super high, controlled brewery and, Coors or something like that. The ABV is generally high in the triples, but as craft beer states, it's still approachable for many, so it's not, a stout. These are most likely bottle conditioned in most cases where the yeast is left after fermentation so that it can continue carbonating.
Yeah, you'll see that with a lot of homebrews.
And as for the other Belgian style beers, they're more similar to the Golden Strong ales as opposed to the more similarly named doubles or quadruples.
Which we'll talk about tomorrow.
So weird.
Yeah, we'll get into how weird these are, and the naming conventions don't really make sense.
So just remember that the triples are on the lighter side. And they're
usually, yeah. We actually have had a triple on the show, but it was a strong dark triple, which people do whatever they want with the beer, and that was the Golden Draak from the brewery, which name we cannot pronounce.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was a good beer too, but it was probably not the best example of a triple.
It was not what I was expecting when we had it.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really good example of like this is a light beer, but it's a dark ale. How they made it, and so you can really just do whatever you want with beer. It's so broad of a spectrum that you could just literally make whatever you want. So the next one we've got is the Saison or Saison. I don't really know how to say
Saison,
it. Saison. We got the Belgian style Saison, which is an IBU of 20 to 38, a BU to GU of 0.5 to 0.5. So it's right there in the middle. You got sweet and bitter, but they just coexist. And then an SRM of 4 to 14. So these ones can go a little on the darker side. So just like the triples, these are usually bottle conditioned. And I'm going to read this right from craftbeer.com because this is a really
We can assume that everybody listening to this podcast is a little bit nerdy, so just bear with us.
It says Belgian-style Saisons may have fruity, horsey, goaty, and or leather-like aromas and flavors. Andrew, you were talking a little bit ago about sometimes beers can have a sweaty socks flavor. And I think we've actually had a beer that Garion described as leathery. Yeah. And so I think that's just an interesting point that the aromas and weird things you can get from beers is just so vast.
Yeah, it's more
especially
like
when
when you're drinking it and you also are kind of smelling it. Not like any of us know what leather or sweaty socks necessarily taste like, but it's just sort of reminiscent of what you get when you smell those things.
I mean, you guys just don't go and chew on leather?
Not often.
Not anymore.
I mean, you seem to know what the sweaty sock. You were immediately keen on that sweaty sock.
Man, I played football in high school. Okay. But yeah, I think that's probably from sort of the wild nature of how Saisons are made, right? They get a lot of these wild yeasts during the fermentation, and so sometimes you get some crazy flavors.
Yeah, and I think the whole the smells horsey and goaty is the reason why they're part of the farmhouse ales. Like there's 3 or 4 different types of beers that are categorized as farmhouse ales, and Saison I think is the most common of them.
Yeah, it's definitely the only one that I recognized, but they're usually have some spice flavors to them, and then like Drew's saying, they're part of the farmhouse ales, which basically just used to mean a summertime beer in Belgium, but now they just make them all year round because they're so damn good. And then a lot of the Saisons that I remember having have been more on the sour side, which is
my challenge to all you viewers is to take 2 bottles of a Saison, put one in the fridge, get it nice and cold, and leave the other room temperature like they do in Germany, and try both of them. And see what flavors
I bet there's
come out in that
vastly
warm
different
one.
flavor profiles you can get.
Yeah.
So the example we got for the Saison is the Boulevard Brewing Tank 7.
That was a really good one.
It was a really good one.
All right, so the next one we have here is the American Pale Ale, the APA. IBUs 30 to 50, BU to GU 0.68 to 1.0. So this is right on that bitter end.
Oh, yeah.
100% bitter sometimes. SRM values between 6 to 14, so now we start to get into those like darker amber colors. So APAs are generally characterized by the use of the American hops that are used in it. So we get like floral, fruity, citrus-like, and piney smells and flavors to them. And Garion, you always just hate the pine trees.
I mean, I love the smell of pine trees. It's just that
you don't want
coating bitter. Yeah.
So they have a nice medium body to them that has that toasted malty kind of flavor, and it's one of the best beers to just pair along with basically any food. It is so kind of palate cleansing
I
to
was
it.
going to say, it itself is a palate cleanser. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and you might think that because these are so bitter, they don't work for that, but it's a refreshing kind of bitterness to it.
Yeah, and craft beer says that the American Pale Ale's affinity to food can be attributed to the simplicity of its ingredients, which includes a toasty pale malt, a really clean yeast, and the counterbalance of the American hops, just to tease out the flavor or cleanse the palate, preparing you for another bite.
Ooh.
So the example we have here is the Park City APA, which is a bad example because it was not a great one. But instead, I'd like to use Deschutes Brewery's Mirapon, which is an American Pale Ale.
Yeah, I don't want to throw stuff onto our outline here, but I had a beer just the other day. It's the Roja Black Porch Pale Ale. Also really good. Pretty hoppy, but it's a little more balanced. So if you want a more mellow APA, try that one first, maybe. So the last little guy we have on this list here is the IPA, which is the Indian Pale Ale. Today, specifically, we're going to talk about the American IPA, which is a little confusing. But the IBUs are, quite high, 50 to 70, and the BUGU 0.83 to 0.93, which kind of surprises me because the pale ales can just go all the way up to 1, where the IPAs apparently, in general, don't go quite as high. But the SRM is from 6 to 14. So these, while being extremely bitter, are also going to be pretty light in color. It's generally characterized by floral, fruity, and citrus notes, as well as pine or resin type hop flavors. And I think it's that resin, kind of like sap flavor, that gets a lot of people. It just kind of coats the tongue.
Yeah, it can be a little overpowering.
Yeah, but to those of you who like them, that's just the most refreshing thing you can have. So these types of beers are all about hops and bitterness, and they just have these really, really floral, strong but great smells. And these are the most entered category at the Great American Beer Festival. And as we can see with this craft beer kind of resurgence, it makes sense. That's what people are going for. IPAs are some of the more popular craft beer.
They're the hot beer right now.
Yeah, I think if you say craft beer, people immediately think IPAs.
Yeah, when you find people who like to drink a whole lot of beer, a lot of times it's like the really simple lagers, the Coors and the Millers.
Yeah, if you're drinking in larger
shit.
quantities.
But anybody else who ventures out there, generally, their favorites are these IPAs. They're really crisp and refreshing. Like we said, they pair with food really well. And we've got a couple really good examples here.
So I put the Melvin 2x4 double IPA, which I'm not really an IPA guy. I like them. They're just too much sometimes. But for whatever reason, the Melvin 2x4 is my favorite IPA, even though it's a double IPA. It's really strong, but it's so good.
Yeah, and to kind of add to that, the two that I put on here, the first one is the Lagunitas Super Cluster Ale, which was the one that was Citra Hopped Mega Ale. And what they mean by that is that it's an Imperial IPA, which means it's going to have a higher alcohol content, and they're usually stronger. But that was a really good beer.
Wasn't
when
that
we
one
had
like 9 or 10% or something
like that? Yeah, it was really good.
And
then
the higher side.
The other one, Cory, you didn't get to try this one, but it was the Founders Brewing Company's Barrel Runner. This was a rum barrel aged mosaic hop ale, which again, this was an Imperial IPA.
If you're looking for an IPA, this was not the one. But if you're looking for a new IPA that maybe tingles a few other taste buds, this was a crazy good beer.
Yeah, this is the one that I traded Garion for.
Yeah.
And I think we should shout out to hazy IPAs, which are, I think they're a newer kid on the block, but they've got more citrusy notes in addition to the bitterness
Yeah,
notes, so they're a lot easier to drink.
I would guess, we don't have this information at the ready, but I would guess they're probably a little lower on the BUGU as well. That kind of a little more of a balance,
Yeah.
Delicious, yeah.
All right. So those are the light beers, or at least what we're calling light beers. I'm sure that you could throw in a bunch more. I mean, obviously there's some on craftbeer.com that we're just glancing over here.
There's so many beer
Yeah, and I'm
varieties.
There's
sure
like 200 beer styles or something like that they talk about.
Well, and as you can see, all these things fall within a range. So you might find some of the beers we talked about that fall out of what we're considering light. There might be stuff that falls into light, but
Yeah, the example that we gave for the triple was actually a dark beer by the color, but it is characterized as a more lighter beer generally.
yeah.
All right, boys. We've had a chance to sip on these drinks. We've had some lagers.
Speaking of light beers,
What'd you guys think?
so every time I've gone for a drink of this St. Pauli girl, the first thing is just, when we say skunky, I personally don't necessarily mean like it's gone bad. Like it literally is reminiscent of like skunk or weed a little bit. It's like kind of like an over, I don't know, rotten malt kind of.
Yeah, it's one of those weird smells that it smells bad or weird, but you kind of like smelling it because it's just so weird. It's like the smell of gasoline. You're just like,
Yeah.
I hate this, but I also like
I'll
it.
be honest, I don't like the smell. Every time I reach in for it, I'm like, oh God. But the taste is, you get none of it. It's pretty bitter. It does have just like that lingering hop at the end. But overall, I mean, it's a pretty sweet, carbonated, sessionable little lager.
Yeah, the smell, not a fan of at all.
Yeah,
but
I don't
the
think I'd
taste-
have more of them just because of the smell.
Yeah, the taste is a lot fruitier than like an American lager. Just has that sweetness to it, and then again, that hop just kind of hangs out for a while.
Yep.
Yeah, it's crazy the disparity between the skunk smell and then just the sweetness.
Yeah,
flavor,
someone
yeah.
was like, do you want to have this? And I just smelled it. I probably knew.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that is completely different from what you'd expect.
And then Cory, you've got the
I've got the Pilsner style lager from Lev Golden Lion. It's a really weird brewery, but it's Czech, and it's really good. Like we were saying earlier, this one, it's on the darker side, so you get a lot of that malt character, but then you still get a lot of sweetness. It smells good. It's really smooth.
I think what's interesting is that it is a Pilsner style lager.
Yeah, so we kind of touched on this, but you could just mix sort of styles all together and do crazy things with beer, and I think that's one of the best parts of it.
Yeah, I don't remember back to the beginning of the episode here when we talked about Pilsners, but Pilsners are used, they have a specific malt that they use.
That one definitely has a much stronger malt flavor, the Lev. I would say for sure it's lower on the BUGU. It's pretty sweet, almost spiced.
Yeah, it's just when we talk about European beers, especially Belgian beers, not that this one is, but they have a lot of funk going on. I think this one lines up really well with that one. It's got some funk, but
Infinitely better on the nose.
but
It's got a nice
maltiness in it,
malt
some
body,
sweet,
but it
yeah.
actually finishes very light.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the last one we have here is the Margaritaville Landshark.
Woo!
I mean, to me, it sure is like a light lager.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, there's not really anything like, whoa, this is the craziest beer I've ever had. It's just, it's so easy to drink. It's so sweet. It's beautiful looking. I love the bottles because they're clear.
Actually, I don't think it's as sweet as St. Pauli Girl. I think that it is kind of overpowered by going back and forth between these beers. It's very muted, but again, it just has all of the like classic beer flavors, but just kind of toned down significantly.
Yeah.
Especially the hop flavor is like barely there at all.
Yeah, it's infinitely sessionable, as we like to say.
Yeah, going between St. Pauli Girl and the Land Shark. I think the St. Pauli Girl, like you said, I think it probably does have more sugar to it, but I think it has way more bitter, so it probably falls further up the BUGU scale, because I get a lot more of that like lingering hop, and the Land Shark is just sweet. And just, I mean, it's really light, so it's not like drinking, like a soda or anything like that. It's very clean and crisp. I mean, I could definitely see Cory smashing about 12 of those.
Yeah,
Those are
it's
good as
perfect
hell.
summer beer.
Yeah, I like those a lot. So,
Speaking of getting smashed,
we've got a deck tech to talk about on the end of this episode. We're still going to do some magic. And
What?
today, we decided to recruit the old Drewster. What are we doing?
No, not that
Drewster
name. That
the
is
Rooster.
the shittiest fucking... Still the shittiest nickname I've ever heard.
All right, I won't go there.
I've heard a lot of shitty nicknames in my day.
But let's give us a rundown. What deck is this?
So this is my Fblthp.
I like it.
It's hard to say. Just put Mill instead of the F, and you're there. So it's using Fblthp the Lost. So this is a mono blue deck. Fblthp the Lost is 1 in a blue for a 1/1 legendary creature, Homunculus. When Fblthp enters the battlefield, draw a card. If he entered from your library or is cast from your library, draw 2 cards instead. When Fblthp becomes the target of a spell, shuffle Fblthp into its owner's library.
so this card used to be a meme where he would just pop up on little cards or like in the random corner. And
Yeah,
so
he was
they-
on like a dozen
Totally
cards or
lost.
something like
yeah,
that. I don't know.
and
He was,
they finally gave him his own card, and he's a legendary creature.
yeah, people have been asking for it for a long time, and the Wizards were just like, yeah, okay. And everyone's like, bet you won't. They sure did.
They did, and he's weird as hell.
He's just the cutest little homunculus.
I think it's very reminiscent of why I made this deck in the first place.
Yeah.
Because we were at Warspark pre-release, and we were joking around. I think it was basically we were arguing about whether or not Fblthp was even like playable. And I was like, he's totally playable. If I get him, put him in my deck. And I don't know who it was. And they were just like, man, how funny it would be to get a commander deck based around him. And I was like, all right, if I pull him as my promo, I'll make a commander deck around him.
I think Sean was talking about if he pulled a feather, he's going to make
Oh, right, that's what it was.
a feather deck. And then you said, if I pull Fblthp, I'm going to make it. And we're just like, ooh,
like,
I don't think you should.
Yeah. And like Garion said, open mouth, insert foot. So this is a mill deck, but this is also just a toolbox deck. I call it that because there's a lot going on. If you have a strategy you like to use, I can probably do it with this deck. Tokens, mill, self-mill. You like to draw cards, that's what the whole deck is based around. If you want to just one-punch someone, like there's a way to do that here. I got a storm outlet. Like there's a lot going on here, all in the deck.
Yeah, and I think that just says so much about mono blue just in general because it has so many options.
Yeah, so with the mill strategy, which it is a mill shell that benefits off of drawing cards, like I said. It's got classic mill cards like Curse of the Bloody Tome.
So Curse of the Bloody Tome is 2 and a blue for an enchantment. It's a curse. Enchant player, at the beginning of enchanted player's upkeep, that player puts the top 2 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard.
So this kind of illustrates that there's a lot of enchantments in the deck that are kind of based around this mill strategy. I think a better one is Sphinx's Tutelage. For 2 and a blue, it's an enchantment. Whenever you draw a card, target opponent puts the top 2 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. If they're both non-land cards that share a color, repeat this process. And so if Fblthp comes in, I'm drawing a card, forcing someone to mill, and it could just chain back and forth over and over again. It's really punishing against monocolored decks, but it also has an activated ability, 5 and a blue, draw a card, then discard a card. So I can draw a card off of this card alone if I have the mana for it.
Yeah, so a lot of mill strategies, they need a lot of pieces usually, and this is just one of those pieces that sort of just functions on its own.
Yeah, and the reason why I like this is just because, one, I'm an enchantment player, obviously, but enchantments are hard to interact with, so having these is kind of a safer way to do it than have like a creature or anything like that. And then there's also just some recent powerhouses that have been added, like
the bastard
Fleet
of
Swaller.
the sea.
Yeah. So Fleet Swaller, 5 blue for a 6/6 creature fish. Whenever it attacks, target player puts the top half of his or her library rounded up into his or her graveyard.
I think the key word here is when it attacks,
Right.
not when it deals combat damage. It doesn't have to do anything. It just has to attack.
And that just has a nice combo with Fraying Sanity for 2 and a blue. You enchant player at the beginning of each end step. Enchanted player puts the top X cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, where X is the number of cards put into that graveyard from anywhere this turn. So whether that's them discarding, milling, creatures dying, tokens even will go into the graveyard. Although I don't know if they count because they're not cards specifically, but like there's a lot of ways that cards are going to enter the graveyard, and it counts all of those. So with Fleet Swallower, put your top half of your library in. Oh, end of turn, put the rest of it.
Yeah, so mill is either just gradual over time, or it's these just big effects where you just get taken out immediately.
Yeah,
just one-shotted.
So while I was building this deck, I kind of was talking to Cory about making this deck consistent and viable, and there was just not really a good way in Commander to make mill good.
Yeah.
And so basically a lot of the mill decks that I was saying that were like that looked mildly successful were started to go into combos. Yep. And so yes, this is also a combo deck. So we've got the ISO Reversal, which Icecrown Scepter and Dramatic Reversal.
Icecrown Scepter, it's a 2-drop artifact with imprint. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile an instant card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your hand. You can pay 2 and tap it. You may copy the exiled card. If you do, you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost.
And Dramatic Reversal is an instant for 1 and a blue. It says untap all non-land permanents you control.
So obviously this is a really easy way to make infinite mana and do a lot of infinite shenanigan loops.
Yeah, and so if you just want one extra card to go along with that, I chose Gilded Lotus. So it's 5 generic mana. You tap, add 3 mana of any one color. And so that generates you net +1 mana. So I can just generate infinite mana by tapping Icecrown Scepter just over and over again.
It used to be insane before Paradox Ender got banned.
Oh yeah, it was even
Because
more
then
broken.
you could just basically cast your old deck and stuff.
Yeah. So that generates me infinite mana, but I need a way to win after that. So we've got Proteus Staff, which is 3 generic for an artifact and has activated ability 2 and a blue, tap it, put target creature on the bottom of its owner's library. That creature's controller reveals cards from the top of his or her library until he or she reveals a creature card. The player puts that card into play and the rest on the bottom of his or her library in any order. Play this ability only anytime you could play sorcery. So most of this deck operates on my turn, so that last part doesn't really matter. But the idea is that I've got so few creatures in the deck that when I start chaining Proteus Staff over and over again with Icecrown Loop, then I can just chain Fblthp over and over again. I can just draw my entire deck. And if I've got things like Sphinx's Tutelage or any of the other like mill cards that care about me drawing cards, then I just start to mill my opponents out. And so just keep going with the infinite mana. We've got Capsize, which I can just lock out my opponents, basically just bounce all over their stuff, and they just don't get to play the game anymore. I got Blue Sun Zenith, so I can just draw my entire deck and win with that sort of strategy, or I can just, because it's targeting, I can mill my opponent. Then there's Keening Stone and Mind Shrieker, which are just mana sinks, so I can just mill my opponents out that way. The other combo I have in here is, I think, my favorite combo. It's one that not a lot of people know about, I think. So it uses Mirror and Spy, Banishing Neck, and Darksteel Relic, or any Cheerio. So Mirror and Spy is 2 and a blue for a creature drone. It's a 1/3 and has flying. It also has, whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may untap target creature. So that combos really well with Banishing Neck, which is 1 blue for an instant. Until end of turn, target creature gains tap, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So you cast Banishing Neck on Mirror and Spy, and then you play Darksteel Relic, which is a 0-drop just for an artifact. Darksteel Relic is indestructible. And so if I have any artifact like this out, then I can just bounce it over and over again with Mirror and Spy. And what that does is generates a new set of win conditions for me. It infinitely casts artifact spells, infinitely generates artifact enter the battlefield triggers. So an example of a way to utilize this is Psymaster Thopterus for 2 and a blue. We've got a 1/4 legendary creature, human artificer. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. So with this combo, I literally just generate infinite number of Thopters, or an arbitrarily high amount. And the other primary way to use this loop is using something like Psy or another token generator with Grinding Station, which is too generic for an artifact. Tap, sacrifice an artifact, target player puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. Again, this is a mill deck, that's kind of the whole point of it. And whenever an artifact comes into play, you may untap Grinding Station. So if I have a token generator out, then I make infinite number of tokens, sack them, it untaps itself, and again, I just mill everyone out. If I am using the token strategy, however, I kind of need a way to get to the point that I can attack with.
Yeah. You mean Mono Blue doesn't have a bunch of haste stuff?
Not usually, no. It does have a pseudo haste, which is just to take an extra turn.
What?
So the card I have here is Gonti's Ether Heart, and I didn't want like just a take an extra turn spell. No, I wanted an artifact specifically. I wanted a way that I could keep the synergies of the deck going. So for 6 generic, it's a legendary artifact. When Gonti's Ether Heart or another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you get 2 energy counters, which isn't something that we normally see that much in Commander.
Yeah, energy counters are one of those mechanics that I would love for them to go back to, but it just doesn't have enough support right now to make viable strategies.
So also just energy counters go on you, so they're a really hard thing to interact with at all. And so I think that it's kind of like one of those pseudo-parasitic mechanics in that if they're going to do it, they have to go back to Kaladesh and they have to like do an entire set based around it, because just printing them again is kind of useless.
Yeah.
So it also has this other activated ability. Pay, I think it's 8 energy. Exile Gonti's Ether Heart. Take an extra turn after this one. So it's a one-time extra turn. It's not like I can loop it a bunch of times. And it requires all of the energy that you get off of artifacts entering the battlefield. So again, you make a bunch of tokens. You're generating all of the energy, and then you sack
You're
Gonti's.
powering the heart.
Yeah, you're getting rid of Gonti's Ether Heart. You exile, take an extra turn, and that's how you actually are able to win. So it is a combo deck, and it is a very kind of convoluted.
I see a terrible word on this list here, Drew. There's a naughty word. There's tutors in this deck.
What?
Yes.
You bastard, you.
Why am I a bastard?
So Drew has been notorious about, not necessarily hating tutors, but sort of feeling them as kind of a cheap way to get good cards in your deck, right?
So
you don't often play them.
Right. I usually avoid playing them in Commander. In other formats, like...
Oh, yeah, Modern.
Yeah.
Fuck you, buddy.
Yeah.
I'm going.
Tutors are incredibly powerful. But while they represent potentially any card in your deck, specifically the black tutors really, they are usually just a way for a deck to get one specific card.
Like your combo piece.
And to me, that's very boring. And I think that it's kind of unfun because Commander, EDH is a 100 card singleton format, which means high variance to all of your games, right? Or at least there should be. This is part of the fun for me, and it's why I usually don't play tutors in my decks.
Being able to have a new game each time you play.
Yes, exactly. Like the experience is novel basically every time you play the deck.
Yeah, I think it makes the game better, but it doesn't necessarily make your deck better.
Yeah. Right.
Not having them.
And so this is a toolbox deck. It is trying to do a lot of things. It has...
Depending on what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. Depending on basically what's in your opening 7, you can do any number of things, right? It is an artifact-heavy deck. So I do have a few artifact tutors. So the best one is probably Fabricate. 2 and a blue for sorcery. Search your library for an artifact card. Reveal it, put it in your hand, then shelf your library. That's just like actual tutor. But what I really like is specific cards like Reshape, because reshape for X blue, you get a sorcery as an additional cost to play reshape, sacrifice an artifact. I'm going to have loads of artifacts if I make tokens, whatever. It doesn't matter. Search your library for an artifact card with converted mana cost X or less and put it into play. And so that's the key on that, is to put it into play. So if I need something and I need it now, then I can get it. So there's 22 artifacts in the deck. And then we also have Artificer's Intuition and Acquire I like, because I get to steal something from my opponent's deck and put it into play. And it is 5 mana, but at the same time, everyone has a Soul Ring. Soul Ring is a very good card in the deck just because it generates mana, and with Ice Crown Scepter and Dramatic Reversal, that it pays for the cost to activate it.
Yeah.
And then also, I just know that there are other combo decks that use some of the same pieces I do. So to steal that, 1, disables their deck, and 2, enables mine.
Yeah, stealing someone's Aetherflex Reservoir is always a good thing.
Yeah. So Artificer's Intuition is probably one that people are like, oh, why are you playing that? It only tutors for 0 drops and 1 drops, but there's 9 cards in the deck that are 0 or 1 drops that are artifacts, which are all important to the deck strategy. Either ramp, or a combo piece, no max hand size, they protect me from milling out, like all of these things that I want in the deck. And also, if I'm getting 0 drop, like that's literally the combo piece I need for my loop. The next one I have is kind of following the same theme, right? I'm doing artifact-specific tutors because I want things that are limited in their scope. I don't want to just be able to get anything, because then I'll probably only get one thing, as ironic as that is. So we've got the Transmute spells. These are converted mana cost specific spells. So I'll read Dizzy Spell, which is the 1 drop. So it's 1 blue. For an instant, target creature gets -3/-0 until end of turn. That's not a great effect on its own, especially in Commander. But it has Transmute. For 1 blue, you discard this card, search your library for a card with the same converted mana cost as this card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle your library afterwards. And you can only play this as a sorcery. So I can Transmute to get a 1 drop with Dizzy Spell, or I can get a 2 drop with Muddle the Mixture, which is probably the most powerful one just because it's also a counterspell attached to it.
Yeah, I think Transmute is a really cool mechanic that they should go back to, because it's just really dope.
Yeah, and then I've got Drift of Phantasms, which I guess if I need a blocker, the one bad part about Drift of Phantasms is that if I am using Proteus Staff, I'll chain it out eventually, which is not great, but if I can chain it back in, then I can use it as a spell again. So Dizzy Spell finds 10 spells, Muddle the Mixture finds 15 spells, including X costed cards. Because remember, if there's X in its mana cost, it doesn't count unless it's on the stack.
Yeah.
So it counts as 0, exactly. And 2 of the 2 drops are artifact tutors. Drift of Phantasms gets me 20 spells, which includes Laboratory Maniac, which, again, this deck can self-mill. So Lab Man, I guess I'll read in case people don't know, which would be surprising at this point. We've talked about it several times. 2 and a blue for creature, human, wizard. If you draw a card while your library has no cards in it, you win the game instead. So if I cast Blue Sun Zenith and mill myself out, or whatever happens to be, there's a way for me to win the game from that.
It's one of those kill on sight win con cards.
Yeah. So Mystical Tutor and Merchant Scroll would be great in this deck. And so those are blue tutors that allow me to fight instants, which is really important because Banishing Knack and Dramatic Reversal, 2 parts of different combos, are instants. And so they would be great, but I would only put those cards in as extra copies of those cards.
Right.
Like, even though they can find several other, an infinite amount, basically, of other spells that I could put in the deck, they're only going to find one thing.
Basically, what you're saying is you've restricted yourself because of the way you want to play it, not because your deck would not be stronger, because it clearly would probably be stronger. You'd have twice as likely chance of getting to your combo pieces.
Yeah, and more than that is that it enables me to find the other combo if the first one gets blown up.
Right.
So I'm not just stuck in one.
I think you can look at it as like, this is happening in the game. I'm going to tutor for this piece to try and save myself instead of, oh, I got my combo. I'm going to tutor for Dramatic Reversal and win every game. So it's just more a versatile way to play.
So if someone were to go and build this deck and wanted it to be stronger, some of these things are good additions. But if you want it to be a less linear way of playing the deck, limiting yourself in this way creates some more.
Yeah, like this deck, like I said, it is a toolbox deck. But that also means that there's higher variance to this than even just normal EDH decks because of the variance of the ways to win.
Right.
For better or for worse.
Yep.
Your wins are more spectacular.
So on here, Drew, you've got the God Hand turn 2
Yeah,
kill
so there's
combo.
an awesome turn 2 kill combo in the deck that I found. I was actually just goldfishing it, and so I was just seeing how some practice drops go, and I was like, man, I could play basically my whole hand in just one turn. So you need the Isochron Scepter and Dramatic Reversal, so you have, your loop there. Your Soul Ring, which gives you 2 colorless mana. Star Compass, which enters tap. It's 2 mana, and it taps for a colored mana. So this is one of the important parts of the deck is that I need colored mana in order to cast spells, obviously, but in order to make loops go off. Then Mind Shrieker, which is really a card that you only see in mill decks and probably only see in
Super
combos.
sick art, though.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's 1 and a blue for a 1/1 creature spirit bird with flying. You can pay 2 and activate this ability. Target player puts a top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard. My trigger gets +X until end of turn, where X is that card's converted mana cost.
Yeah, so this is also the one punch creature in the deck. It's got flying, it's got nice evasion, and it can just get arbitrarily large, however big you want to mill somebody.
Yeah, I mean, if you probably mill somebody even for just like 10 or 20 cards, they're probably going to die if you swing at them.
Well, that's the thing, is that you target somebody else and mill them out, and then you kill someone else with Mind Trigger.
Ooh.
Well, and what's really good about him is you don't have to tap him. So this is, as soon as
And
he
that's
comes out, you're going.
The most important part about this card specifically is that it is just a mana sink, and I can just put in as much as I want. So you need one other card. You technically don't need a 7th card in this hand, but you need an island. You have
so
to
you
have
could mulligan to your god hand.
You can, yeah.
You get 2 shots at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I guess 3
you need an
if you count
island
the
because you need your
3 bulk.
colored mana to start things off, just because of Mind Shrieker specifically. And then your 7th card could be an island. It'll make the thought process behind how to do everything a lot easier. But turn 1, put island, Soul Ring. Use Soul Ring to play Stark Compass. You don't care that it comes in tap. Turn 1, tap Mana Rock is great. Turn 2, play Isochron Scepter, imprinting Dramatic Reversal. Then you activate the Ice Reversal loop, and that'll get you your infinite mana.
Yeah, infinite blue mana because of Star Compass.
Yep. And then you play Mind Shrieker, and you have infinite mana. So you just mill everyone out with your infinite mana.
Hot tips here, guys. When the blue player plays an island into a soul ring into a star compass on turn 1, don't fucking turn away from that guy because you're about to
If
lose.
anyone plays 2 mana rocks on turn, like I said, this is the god hand. Like you have to have the perfect setup for it. I guess alternatively, you could replace Mind Shrieker with Blue Sun Zenith because, again, it's just infinite mana means infinite card draw. And you just draw your deck except for like the last card. I mean, you could draw the last card, but then you need to play Labman. Blue Sun Zenith is then going to shuffle back into your library. You can draw that with any of the other cards that you have in your hand now. And guess what? You win.
Yeah,
Or, play your commander.
If you see any Thrasios combo decks, this is usually how they win. They make infinite mana and then they Blue Sun Zenith shit.
Yeah.
So it's tried and true.
Yeah. So that is the deck. You can win on turn 2. It is a combo deck. There is mill all around it, inside of it, upside of it. I don't think I've ever
Upside of it.
I think it is the upside of it is that it's not like a normal deck.
Yeah.
Right? It is a mill deck. We've been wanting to build a mill deck for ages, and we always thought it had to be black-blue. Basically, you have to run Phoenix is what kind of the idea. And I guess if we're not looking at combo, it's probably the right way to go. But if you're looking at combo, like, why pollute your mana base?
Yeah, just make it as refined
Streamlined
and
as possible.
straightforward.
I've got it on deck stats on our page there. Build it. This is the first deck I think that I spent over $100 on, just because I was like, I need to be consistent with it, right? Like I've got Storm Loop in there. I've got Brain Freeze, because if you're going to storm out in a mill deck, you might as well do it right.
It's all that flavor, man.
Yeah. I didn't put Aetherflux Reservoir in it because that's not the way that I wanted this deck to play.
So Gary and I came up with a bunch of questions to
Have
ask
you been peeking?
I mean,
These are
I
supposed to be
just
secret questions.
Scroll
Just-
down now.
just about
I'll
like
scroll up. I only saw the first one.
the strengths and weakness of the deck, or like what made you choose this and stuff like that. So let's dive into those.
Yeah.
So the first one we got is, what does the deck do well besides milling?
I was going to say it mills people. That's what it does.
Obviously.
So it is, I think, just like my favorite deck in that it does whatever I want it to do, right? Like I love tokens. I love enchantment-based strategies. And I can play both of those. I can make a shitload of tokens and just swing in on the next turn and kill people. I can mill them out. I think that what it does well is that it is able to effectively do a lot of things. The one thing it doesn't do is block.
Yeah, I think just labeling this as a toolbox mill deck is a really good way to put it, because you really can do a lot of stuff. And then so that just sort of leads into the next question is, where does the deck suffer besides obvious mono blue things like ramp and stuff like that?
Honestly, the ramp is fine. I think that,
Yeah, I think your curve is really, really low too.
yeah. And like I said, I think just combat anything. Like if somebody has an aggressive deck, like I think that this deck would be really fun to play against Krenko, in that I don't know how the matchup would be because I'm never blocking, right? Fblthp, I guess I'm willing to play probably up to 6 on Fblthp, but any more than that, and that's too much. The idea is just to get Fblthp back into the library and get more cards off of him.
Yeah, instead of like combat-focused creatures, you more have utility creatures that you can either just shuffle back into your deck and do stuff, or just use them Not for
Draw.
attacking or anything.
Well,
yeah,
I think
just
20% of the creatures are combat focused in that I think there's a total of like 5 or 6 creatures in the deck, and one of them has to attack to do its thing.
Fleet Swallower.
Yeah, like we've already talked about it, but yeah.
Ah, yes.
It's 20% of my deck. Yes, 20% of my deck likes to attack. Sorry, 20% of my creatures like to attack. Not my whole deck.
When you sit down, do you feel like it's arch enemy? Because you're like, hey, I'm playing a mill deck. People are like, oh, hell no. I'm not getting milled.
I don't think it's arch enemy in the same way that other combo decks are, because they look and they see Fblthp and they're like, what the hell is going on here? You get targeted. Okay, the first time you put a curse on someone and you start to mill them out, or I was gonna say you put Fleet Swallower attacking someone. I mean that I understand, but like a lot of the time milling is targeted, and so you have to basically zero in on someone, and it's so inefficient to your win strategy to start milling everybody at the same time. So you basically have to zero in on someone, and then they usually ask for help. Because as soon as you start to have an effective mill going on, other players see that and like, oh, this deck is actually real. And that's when I start to get targeted.
It's going to turn to me.
Yeah, and it's never arch enemy from the start, but a lot of times it'll get there.
Yeah, I feel that. Do you want to keep Fblthp as the commander, or do you want to switch him out for something else?
I will always keep him as the commander because there are way more efficient creatures to be there. But Fblthp, there's a lot of stuff in the deck that is built around Fblthp and drawing cards. So I think that it has to be there.
Loops.
Like, I could easily play Urza, and if I do like the Banishing Knack loop,
Not a bad card.
I literally just generate infinite mana because they come in, I tap the artifact, and I get infinite blue mana.
Yeah.
And so it's just another way to get infinite mana. And Urza would be great in the 99. He'd be probably the best commander in this deck. Like, great, but that's not what the deck.
That's just another Urza deck instead of
exactly
a cool, flavorful
it's just
Fblthp deck.
Like it's supposed to be a meme deck. It's supposed to be a joke, but at the same time, I'll kill you on turn 2. The joke is you're dead. but no, like it's a fun deck because it doesn't have that like obvious power level.
Yeah.
And you have to work for it. Like I have in the deck box that I have it in, I have a paper that is a sheet of instructions, and like not instructions so much. It's just like, this is what's in the deck. If you're tutoring, this is what you're looking for. These are the combos. These are the way to win with the combos.
That is so cool.
Just so that anyone that picks up the deck,
That's tight.
can figure out how it works. Because you get your opening 7, just like, okay, I have artifact matters, I have drawing matters. It doesn't look consistent at all. And then you look at it, and you're like, oh, okay, I see where
All
the
these pieces
are.
fit together in this weird way.
We should all start doing that, because I feel like every time we borrow a deck, I'm like, what do I do with this? I'm like, just play goblins. That's all you do.
swing.
Well, I have a gamble. What do I do?
You gamble for Perforos, and then you swing.
So speaking of power level, one of my questions was, what is the win rate so far with the deck, and what do you consider the power level to be at? 10 being CEDH.
I think it's won probably 35% of the games. Just
These are
because
4-person games?
Yeah. I think all of them but one was a 4-person game. And Cory was in the one. It was just me, him, and Michael.
I stomped their nuts with the Boar God.
And he says that. But what happened is I milled Michael out with Fraying Sanity and Fleet Swallower, I think.
Yeah.
And then Cory just kept ending the turn whenever I tried to do anything. But in 4-player games, I probably have like a 40% win percentage then.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Like, it is good, but the other ones, like, you just get targeted so hard that you can't do anything. I think a lot of the wins are attributed to the fact that people don't really see what's going on. They don't understand what's going on, and so they don't value it as highly as what they probably should. But, that's on them and not on me.
They just let you do your thing.
Yeah, they're like,
for
oh,
just
it's
too
a mill
long.
deck. Well, it's just a lot of the cards just feel very underwhelming, right? Just like,
Like, oh,
he'll
mill 2 cards.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
Mill 2 cards a
Whatever.
turn, that's fine. Like, I'm sure I'll be able to get him back or whatever. And it's just like,
And then, boom, mill 100 cards.
yeah. The way that actually mills people out is very fast, but you got to start somewhere.
It just takes a while to get to
Yeah.
that point. So what do you consider the power level of the deck?
Anywhere from a 3 to
Depending on the draw.
to like probably a 7 or an 8.
Yeah, that's a pretty good range. I think most of our decks don't go past the 8 range.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Even if we have a lot of combos and stuff.
obviously, like, if you're looking at like the peak of what the deck does, it's a 10, right? Like, I can literally just kill you on turn 2.
Turn 2. Yeah.
And even then, I'm sure that there's probably a way that interacts with this, that there may be a turn 1.
Right.
And if I put like Mana Vault in or something like that, then it 100% just kill
Oh,
you on
yeah,
turn 1.
that potential to get it just
Yeah.
rockets.
Like, there's so much in the deck that's inconsistent that the power range is just, it varies so much.
So having the average power range fall somewhere around like a 5 or 6, is that okay with you? Do you plan to upgrade it to make it more competitive, or is it just like the pet deck you want it to be as it is?
I don't know if it's like pet deck in that sense, but I want it to stay about where it is. I think like it's not going to be like my favorite deck. I mean, it's not going to be the deck I play the most. It's not my pet deck in that. It's a fun deck that does what it does. And I don't think that there's a reason to change it unless there's like a new card that's very similar but more efficient. Like if it was instead of target player mills 2 on their upkeep, each player did. Then I would swap that in.
Yeah, I think you said it well when you're talking about Urza. Like you just put Urza as a commander and it would just be 10 times better, but you want to keep it your deck.
Yeah. So what's your favorite aspect and what's your least favorite aspect of the deck?
I think my favorite aspect.
Enough foils.
Yeah, right. True. I mean, I think there's only one, and it's Fblthp because he's my pre-release promo.
That's all you need.
But I think my favorite aspect is that it is so unpredictable, and that each game, like I've said, about the tutors, that I don't like commander decks that are just like overly.
Hey, I'm going to tutor for these 3 cards. I'm going to play them. I'm going to win.
I think that the variability of the deck is what my favorite thing is that like depending on what I rip in my opening 7 tells me how I'm going to play that deck, right?
Like, ooh, I didn't play a token strategy last game, but now we're going for it this game.
I could play 6 games and play a different strategy each time. Yeah. I think my least favorite thing, the deck also tells me what I'm playing. Like I don't get to be going in and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to do token strat this time. The deck says you're doing this specific mill strat with this combo, which is fine, and it's why it's also my favorite thing. But I don't know, it's kind of a tough thing to say.
You don't really have the choice. The most important question, is it fun to play?
I think so.
I don't like it.
I think only one other person has actually played it, so I can't really gauge other people's opinion. I think it's fun just because
I'll play it tonight.
It does all of the things I want.
I mean, it's good. I don't like playing against it, is what I'm saying.
Right. As long as the deck is fun to play, to me, you got a 10 out of 10, Drew. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Play fucking fun cards.
I think that this opened up my eyes to, one, play more tutors. I think that I'll probably end up playing more tutors in decks that I want to be more powerful. Yeah. I understand that the reason why I don't like tutors is because it makes decks more consistent. But if I want to make a more powerful deck, like my Storm deck, putting in tutors might actually be a good way to do it because I want that power level to be there. I want it to be consistent.
What I kind of did with mine is like I have a demonic tutor, right? Not everybody has that. I have some really great tutors just in my collection and I wanted to use them. And so instead of saying, I don't want to make this deck linear, I'm not going to play my tutors, I put my tutors in so that the deck could still say powerful, but I don't have any infinite combos. I don't have a thing where it's like as soon as I get demonic tutor, I find this and play. If I need creatures, I get creatures. If I need a sack outlet, I get a. So I think it just depends on how you play. And I get like when you're trying to win, sometimes you're like, there's one thing I'm going to get every time.
And that is why tutors are so powerful, is because they find you whatever you need in that situation.
Yeah, I think one of the best ways to upgrade your deck, just overall, is land bases.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure.
And just lowering your curve, and then just adding tutors, just like Drew's saying, just to add that consistency.
Yeah. But again, if you don't want that, don't add them. Like if you want your deck to just be upgraded without having that linear consistency, then land base is like a great place to start. And then
if having fun is more important than winning every game, then you may as well, because you're going to have a lot of fun games.
For sure.
So I think that about wraps up our day 1 for this Brewers week on our
we got
light
4
beers.
more.
Yeah, we got a lot of things in the works, my friends.
Lots of beers to drink is what we got.
Garion basically is just going to be working his butt off for the next few days, trying to make sure that all of these episodes come out, are edited on time.
Yeah.
You got a lot of work cut out for you.
We'll get there. We'll make it happen.
Yeah, it's going to be hectic.
So thank you guys for listening. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Always drink responsible. We're not sending any of you children off with these fantastical ideas of drinking beers. Drink as of age. Don't drink and drive. We can't.
I honestly thought you were going to say, don't want any little children going off milling people out. I thought you were going to hate on me for a second.
Responsibly, please.
Yeah, so like, share, follow, subscribe,
please.
all that good stuff. We're on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. Watch these videos so you can see all these super dope beers and super dope mill cards.
Yeah, there's a lot that we talked about. There's more that we could have talked about, but
so many more.
God, there's so many beers out there, guys. Speaking of which, send us your favorites. We've gotten 2 or 3 requests already, so we're going to wrap up some beers, and hopefully we can get those out in the next few weeks, and we'll shout out your name when we get them to our fans and community.
Yep, and if you want to find any of the decks that we talked about this week, we're on Deck Stats. Just look us up, Untap Upkeep, drink.
Yeah, we got all the deck lists. You can peer over everything, recreate it, test it out.
Yep, and like we always say on this show, guys,
have fun.
But not too much.